Thank you, thank you. So thanks for joining us today. I'm sure there's a shuffleboard tournament going on or 2-for-1 pina coladas, and this late on a sunny day, you've confined yourself indoors, so I appreciate that. So as previously mentioned, I'm going to talk about the future of cross-channel marketing. And I'm presenting this in the sense of it's a family affair. This was a study done by Digiday and my firm, Dstillery, which is an ad tech firm. But before I get into it, let me just talk about myself. My primary function today is to be the messenger, but I'll warn you, I'm a fairly opinionated messenger, so I'd love to stir up some discussion at some point. But I do many things with my time. The capacity that brings me here is I'm the vice president of data science at Dstillery. Also, I'm a professor at NYU. I teach data science, so that kind of gives a little nuance into how I want to see things. So why are we here today? Why are we talking about cross-channel? First of all, if we're going to talk about programmatic, we should have at least some dialogue about how does programmatic affect us across different channels. And Dstillery and Digiday got together because we were interested in understanding, kind of taking a pulse on what is cross-channel today. And we're looking specifically at how do you define it, how do we all see it basically, how do we approach it, and what's going to be the future of cross-channel. And when I say we brought the family together, we got agencies, top agency execs, brand executives, as well as top executives across various marketing technology companies, and asked them these questions. And I was one of the first to see the results because I was helping analyze the study, and kind of as I went through them, I got this anxious feeling that sort of reminded me of being at my family's house on Thanksgiving. In the sense that we all have the same DNA, but man, we can really disagree. So there's some interesting twists and quite an actually interesting tension going on, but they do resolve, and so there's a interesting direction that we can take and define as what is the future of cross-channel. I need someone to be my survey says person. As we get into the results, the probably dominant theme across most of what we're thinking about as a group in terms of cross-channel is social. But when we looked at the survey at the top layer, we saw that storyline. But when we went one level deep and segmented across who was saying it, specifically brands versus agency types, we started to see very divergent and different results. So the first one, basic establishing point of what exactly is cross-channel. And I don't have anything behind me. So this was the first area where we started to see divergent paths between thinking. Brands tended to be think of cross-channel as cross-channel. That was the dominant point of view from them. But agencies, on the other hand, instead of calling it cross-channel, are calling it cross-device. So let me take a quick survey. Who here is representing a brand? All right, who here is representing an agency? I need to figure out which side to take. All right, it looks like the agencies are in majority here. But, to their disappointment, I'm going to go with the brands on this one. So, at the risk of sounding a little bit pedantic, I threw this together because I think it is very important to actually have a conversation and establish what we mean by cross-channel and cross-device. And in my capacity in marketing, Dstillery, we're an ad tech company. We specialize in using predictive modeling and machine learning to do programmatic buys at scale. And when we sit there, we get IOs, we get directions. Do cross-channel, do cross-device. The precision of language actually really matters. And if the way ad tech and programmatic works is there's a lot of different companies talking to each other. So as these instructions get passed along and goals get passed along, it really helps to be able to agree on specifically what we mean. So I think for the purpose of this study and the rest of the presentation, we actually went with cross-channel as the preferred language. So here is where I think the conflict and the tension builds in a very interesting way. We asked everybody in the survey, what channel ranks as the highest priority for your campaigns? And here we highlight the, without showing the exact numbers, but the numbers are published in the report, we just show the top priorities split by agency and brand. And what I point out here is, again, at the top level, social media is the top priority for brands. Second to that was online video. But then look at the agencies. Desktop display is number 1. Mobile display is number 2. But look at what the last 2 are for agencies. Here we have social media and video. So what a brand considers its top 2 priorities is exactly what agencies in the survey are considering their least top priorities. So that begs a big question. We're all working together, right? We're all working for the same goals. How and why does this happen? So we asked for quotes. We dug deeper. And here's kind of a synthesis that I thought highlighted some of the predominant thinking going on through the survey. Brands are really, 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 really interested in trust and kind of safety. That's, I think that's been echoed already as we think about viewability and fraud. And particular, the brand mentality, at least in the survey around social, is that the data is trusted and safe. So when we think about programmatic across different channels, one of the biggest challenges is maintaining a consistent identity across the channels. In social, you're almost guaranteed to have that identity. Whether you're on your phone or your laptop, your Facebook identification is the same. And brands really care about this. But on the other hand, the agencies, their focus, they're often tasked with the actual execution of the programmatic campaigns. So it's not surprising that efficiency and ROI are the top priorities on their mind. And I don't know if anybody's actually executed a campaign on any exchange or programmatic medium, but if you want measurement, if you want some data or trackability of your campaign results, display and desktop display is certainly the best, and mobile display is a second, probably, in terms of being able to measure efficiency. So it certainly makes sense that the two divergent point of views certainly make sense when you think about how campaigns get executed and how directives and goals are set. But despite the fact that kind of on a tactical side, there seems to be some disagreement in priorities, the fundamental challenges are still the same. And this is where the two major groups of individuals, brands, and agencies are certainly aligned in thinking the same way. And I'm sure when we look at these board results, you might see these as the top 2 priorities. At least we'll see if there's consistency in the group. So the number one thing that everyone seems to think about as far as overcoming as a challenge, it's good metrics and having good data. And that's still consistent with the social versus display concepts displayed before. Brands really want data, and agencies want metrics. And what we need to figure out is how can we have both? And so we all, again, want trust and efficiency. We just don't always agree on how to get there. So I want to talk about, for the next half of the presentation, what I think is part of the future of programmatic. And I think Brian said it before, what can we do that's beyond traditional display? And so there's, we actually asked this in the survey, and there's other mediums such as TV and video. But I want to talk about actually programmatic social. And I'm going to try to introduce a new cliche. Instead of having your cake and eat it too, in the spirit of the season, I want to have your turkey and fixins too. So here's what I'm calling the new recipe for trust and efficiency. Some of you may already be aware of these concepts, but as only 50% of the survey's respondents considered social a programmatic medium, I know that at least some portion of the ad tech community or the marketing community might not be aware that these options are available. So here's the recipe. You've got your data and customers. This is your first-party brand data. People hitting your action pixels, or people hitting your on-site pixels, people in your CRM system, and you've got the social media platforms. You've got predominantly Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. This is where you have kind of a safe environment, right? This is an area where there's the least likelihood of the inventory being fraudulent. You tend to have high viewability, trusted brands, et cetera. Now we're starting to develop this middle layer, which is connecting the first-party brand data with the social platforms. And here I've got Dstillery, which is my favorite DSP or buyer of choice, naturally. But any, particularly for Facebook, almost a lot of different DSPs and programmatic platforms can facilitate this. So I'm going to go through each one of these individually, because they all have some similar themes, but there are some nuances between them. Facebook, or FBX, was probably the original one. It was developing around 2011 and 12. It's, at this point, probably launched with most programmatic buyers. And with FBX, as a brand, you bring your data to Facebook. So when someone is checking out their news feed or doing any sort of activity on Facebook, you can actually, in a real-time bidding fashion, buy that ad impression based on the data that you bring to the system. And this is one of the more interesting kind of developments and phenomenon that had been going on, particularly with social targeting and native advertising, if you want to call it. For the longest time, Facebook was as walled of a garden as it could be. Data didn't go out and data didn't go in. And naturally, if you're Facebook or even Twitter or LinkedIn, you think your data is great and you have a monopoly on that data. So why did Facebook choose to let people bring their own data? My opinion as a data scientist who spent the last 6 years analyzing this type of data is your friends don't necessarily indicate that you're in market for a particular product. The fact that you like Taylor Swift or any other random band doesn't mean that you are going to buy this particular product. But your web browsing behavior and visits to a particular first-party marketer site do. And so I think Facebook realized that to remain competitive, they had to open up and enable this sort of transactional processing. So in this case, by bringing in your own data, and I'm talking about the brands, usually through the agency and various DSPs or programmatic buyers or ad networks, you bring your own data to the party, and that's where you get the efficiency. The trust comes from the fact that you're still within the walls of Facebook's walled garden. So you get you get trust in terms of like the environment in which the ad will be shown. There's a similar phenomenon happening with Twitter, and this is probably about a year old at this point. It's called Twitter Tailor Audience. This is very similar in flavor to Facebook, the FBX exchange, but it's not exactly a real-time bidding environment. There's a handful, just over a dozen partners that are involved with this that can let you do this, but through them, you could take your own first-party data or any segments modeled off of your data, bring it into Twitter, and have Twitter targeting based on your data. So here's another situation where you have a social network that you understand and trust, whose data might not be exactly what you need to drive efficiency, opening up their doors and letting you target within them. So last we have LinkedIn, and here's this one is a little bit different than the other two because instead of targeting specifically on the LinkedIn platform, you're able to use your data as well as LinkedIn data and target outside of LinkedIn on other platforms. So here's an opportunity where you have really, out of the three social networks, my personal opinion is that the LinkedIn data is probably the most valuable and reliable for certain types of campaigns, particularly if you're a B2B marketer. There's your job title might not indicate that you're going to buy a phone anytime soon or that you're going to go shopping at some retailer, but it probably indicates whether you're going to be a good candidate for a particular IBM server or a marketing solution or accounting software, et cetera. So with LinkedIn Smart Audiences, you can actually take LinkedIn data outside of their platform. LinkedIn has this enviable position where their data is worth a lot and their inventory is practically sold out. So they're taking it externally. And this is actually something I'm very proud of because this is an offering that I've helped put together at Dstillery, where we're taking LinkedIn's data and expanding it, making it bigger and more scalable, and enabling marketers to reach that audience outside of the standard LinkedIn platform. And again, this is still a situation where you could bring your own data to the party. So you can actually use first-party data mixed with LinkedIn data, do some fancy modeling on it to help facilitate and drive an efficient campaign. So it's interesting to me to see how, as a group, we've taken divergent paths, particularly when at least I consider myself an outsider because I don't work for an agency, I don't work for a brand, but I do spend a lot of time meeting with both. And I kind of naively thought that, yes, we all had the same goals. And I think we do at a very meta level. But of course, what I see from the survey is that at the end of the day, we just really care about return on investment. We want to spend money and get more money in return. But because of the various dynamics of how campaigns are executed, and I think as you go further down the chain from brand to agency to the actual technology partner, the understanding of the programmatic environment, which I think was quoted before that, ironically, this was supposed to simplify the world of advertising, but it's actually made it potentially a lot more complicated. And unless you're actually coding and building the technology, you're not necessarily understanding all the components. As you get several degrees away from the actual implementation of the campaign, it's the transparency and your knowledge of it tends to go away. So I think that is driving some of the perspectives that we saw here. But there is definitely options beyond traditional programmatic display. I'm not sure TV is ready for it yet, but it's definitely interesting. But we at the very least have social as an option. So I'll end it there. We have 2 minutes for questions. I can't see anything with the spotlights in my face.
I couldn't help but notice that Google was noticeably absent from your presentation. I mean, I was just kind of curious on why that was.
Google. I don't necessarily see Google as a social platform. I mean, that could be up for debate, but Google Plus is hardly something that...
So why do you think brands are so much more trusting of social platforms then?
So the question is, why are brands more trusting of social platforms? I think my feeling is that every brand is also a user. Well, every brand manager or marketing manager is also a user. You spend a lot of time on Facebook, you spend a lot of time on Twitter. So you actually understand what it is as from a first-person point of view. No one, except for a few tech people, are in the weeds of the ad exchanges and really understand what's going on in there. So it just comes down to, unless you're a technologist, do you really understand the inner workings of something? And most people have a good intuitive understanding of Facebook and Twitter and therefore trust it. It's just kind of instinctual at that point.
So you see them as being some of the biggest winners of this kind of move to programmatic?
They're doing a good job. I mean, one of the things that the major social networks have, and certainly this is where I would add Google, is the persistent identity across devices. You're the same login, and so Facebook is definitely making moves, buying Atlas and putting together the technology. Google bought Odometry for multi-touch attribution. So when you get to take multi-touch attribution beyond desktop into mobile and soon potentially TV and household, I mean, that's a huge win for those guys. So and again, when it comes to attribution, persistent identities across devices, I think that's way more important for attribution than it is for necessarily targeting. But that's where they're going to, I think, play a big role. Any other questions? I guess.
Hi. So just wanted to touch base a little bit on mobile. I think you quite rightly pointed out that LinkedIn, Facebook, and the whole notion of deterministic ID is, becoming actuality. But I think I read the statistic I read the other day was by 2020, 80% of adults on Earth are going to have a smartphone. Desktop is just going to continue to just kind of dwindle. And I think everyone in this room is going to sort of port over to that mindset. Well, then the question becomes, well, what's happening in mobile? Like, I think a lot of people are sort of driving to install, and install sort of becoming the new click, but not enough focus is being paid to retention. There's some interesting companies that are working with deep linking. Facebook has their own version with app links. Google is testing it out, but it's sort of siloed with mobile search. I'm interested to hear how you see that playing out, and if those three, like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, they can fill in the gaps with deterministic ID and tying one unique user across all devices, but can that scale?
So my thoughts on mobile, starting from the beginning of your question, is if you want to do any sort of analytics or optimization, you need to be able to define positive outcomes and measure them, optimize towards them, et cetera. And I don't know if anybody's done any analysis on mobile clicks. We do mobile ad impressions, and the top 10 apps that drive click-through rate are either 8 of them are games and 2 of them are flashlights. So people are literally clicking in the dark. They're trying to find their keys or something, and they're just looking for the button. And you throw the ad right there, you get a click. So if you want to do click-through rate optimization, just do it on some games for children, where they're trying to like pop bubbles or something, and or flashlights. So one of the things I'm coming across so beyond app installs, I think app installs is a fairly obvious game, and a lot of companies, even the Twitters and Facebook, are putting a lot of investment behind it. Is a lot of brands haven't necessarily designed their mobile site yet for commerce. I've met with several brands that we work with that, when they do a mobile campaign to aid the desktop campaign. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out innovative ways to measure the added value that you get from a mobile campaign. But they kind of admit that their mobile platform yet isn't quite optimized yet for commerce. So the trackability from that end just isn't there.
Do you see Apple Pay changing that?
What's that?
Do you see Apple Pay changing that?
It could. I mean, certainly one of the friction points of mobile commerce is entering your credit card. So if your payment information can be embedded in the process, so that's actually a good opportunity for them if they're developing it from scratch at this point. Build it with the Apple Pay in mind, which, the fewer steps to purchase that a user can make, the better, especially having to put in a 16-digit number in a small mobile form will help that a lot. But I think once you get those elements there, you'll see the ad dollars follow. Because right now it's still kind of one of those 50% of my advertising, I don't know which one is working yet with mobile situations.
Thanks, man.
Time for more, or should I?